Rashmi, what do you think? What do you see as the domestic travel trends, especially post-COVID? I mean, of course, Vistara requires no introduction to our listeners here, and but it would be nice to know from you, how do you see this whole domestic tourism trend? There are some very fancy figures being bandied around that it's going to be a $60 billion industry, tourism industry by 2028, and it's going to be driven by domestic tourism. What are your thoughts?
Well, Parul, I think that, it's very heartening to see that the world of travel is now opening up again after nearly 2 years of being at a standstill. Today, if we look at the travel scenario, it has completely changed from what it was in the past, what we used to experience earlier. Um, the significant demand right now is for domestic travel instead of the outbound travel that it used to be there earlier. From pre-travel tests to check-ins to high focus on hygiene and quarantines, every process has transformed. But we have all noticed that and experienced also that technology now touches every part of the traveler's journey, from home to airport, hotel, road transport, everything. And over the years also, the travel has moved from traditional ways of buying and selling to online platform. Uh, but the pandemic has accelerated the adoption of the digitization. One prominent change that we have been noticing is a sharp increase in web check-in, and when we are talking about the trends, that this is one significant trend that we look at. People have been increasingly doing web check-ins, and to probably avoid the long queues, delays, or avoiding being in the crowd. And in fact, in Vistara's web check-in also, we have seen an increase of over 90% now, and that I believe is an industry trend, which is very, very interesting to see. Uh, the other trend is, before the pandemic struck, it was a common practice that, vacationers used to book months in advance to get a good deal. But the scenario has changed now completely. The booking window has become very short. The majority of the bookings are coming in within 7 to 15 days prior to the flight. And I would think that, the reason for this is that people wanted to be sure that, their COVID tests are in place, and it could be performed, for 72 hours or 42 hours prior to their flight, or to avoid any kind of uncertainty that is there in terms of sudden changes into the state regulations. So that is the second trend that we have been observing. Third one is basically, when I was talking about the technology, so contactless travel is something that we are looking at. So safety and hygiene has actually become the most important consideration amongst customers, that leads to fast adoption of contactless travel. Vistara was the first airline to introduce paperless boarding 2 years ago, in fact. We are providing scan and fly, self-tagging, self-baggage, handling drop, e-boarding passes, biometrics, and face recognition technologies. So all this has been initiated from the very start of the pandemic, to ensure that it's a seamless and hassle-free experience for our travelers. Um, we are actually the first airline in India to provide this facility of booking an additional seat to have this sense of comfort that I have my own social distancing space. Other than that, we are providing our in-flight entertainment and our in-flight magazine also through a QR code card, so that people don't have to touch anything while they are on board. And finally, we see some other demand trends also. Basically, we see that the majority of the demand is coming from VFR, which is visiting friends and family, and leisure travel. We don't see a very significant revival of the corporate travel. It is coming, definitely, it is slowly coming back. But because, there are these corporate events being organized, MICE is there, people are going back to their, offices, their workplace. So we see a slow revival of the corporate travel, but majorly the demand is being driven by VFR and leisure travel. And we have been also seeing an increase in demand for the premium cabins, so business class and PY, because you get more space, enhanced comfort, additional, service, social distancing. And I was very interested to see the survey that you have done. We have also seen a significant uptake of destinations like Leh, Goa, Udaipur, Jodhpur, Cochin, and Trivandrum of sorts. So yeah, so this is an interesting trend, and the domestic tourism is definitely on a rise these days.
Thank you, Rashmi. I think what I take away from what you just said, that there are two, three very interesting points. Firstly, the fact that it's leisure and visiting friends and family and corporate is still slow. That's an interesting indicator of where we still are with the pandemic and the fears. The second thing you and we discussed this before the panel as well, that whereas the feeling is that there is a lot of digital uptake of travel, it's basically confined to web check-ins and contactless check-in, and it's not really digital uptake is not as high as it can be. So there's a lot of scope for that. Could you shed some more light on that before I go over to Dilshad for next set of questions?
I personally feel that the Indian travelers were basically not very, very technology savvy earlier, but now this pandemic thing has just forced upon them, because it is mandated by the regulation also that you have to carry your boarding pass as a digital boarding pass with you. People don't want to touch things, so that is also again something that has forced them to use biometrics or other touchless solutions, like self tagging of the bags, fly and scan and fly. So those kind of services, it just came upon on the airlines also to provide such a services to the customer, as well as on the customers also to become savvy with using these technologies. So we see a rise in terms of there is definitely a confusion. People reach out to our staff and seek help. But we see that the customers are, over a period of time, increasingly being more aware about using these technology, and it's an increasing trend, and some sort of technology adaptation is there. People understand that now this is the new normal of travel.
Thank you, Rashmi. I'll come back to you for more questions, but over to Dilshad first. Dilshad, first, I'd really love to. We all know that you're probably one of the few people, not only in the country but in the world, who've set up entire TV channels, and from there to a very specific kind of tourism. I would say a very, very ethical, a very, very specific kind of tourism, which is very inclusive. So do tell us a little bit firstly about your own domestic tourism philosophy. And the second question after that is that, are you seeing more interest from perhaps the much maligned Indian traveler?
So Parul, like you said, I was busy launching television channels for 23 years of my life. I joined the travel industry really only in 2013. And I'm a numbers-driven person. That is my training. And the one thing that I noticed the moment I joined the industry and I first just started, because I had learned from scratch. I literally learned from scratch. I didn't even know what CP, AP, EP meant. All right. So I had a lot of the juniors, colleagues in my office teaching me. But what I noticed in terms of the numbers was something very fascinating, especially the adventure travel industry and the active holiday industry, large focus on inbound traffic. And I'm talking 2013 here. And when I saw the numbers, it just didn't add up for me, because at that time, I think we were at about 6.3 million inbound travelers, but we were at over 1,000 million domestic travelers. So my first question always was that, why are we focusing on the inbound travel? Why is our website focused on the German and the American and the Spanish. Why are we not focusing on our own Indians who are traveling? The second question I had, which it came as a real shock to me, was the 5-star hotels in the country charged the domestic traveler higher than the foreign traveler. And I was like really puzzled with that. I was like, seriously? I mean, why? What is that? And if you look at the numbers, even now, 2019, I've got the figures right here in front of me. That's the last figures to look at, taking COVID into consideration. 2019, 10.93 million foreign tourist arrivals. Yeah, we're not counting the non-resident Indians who've come back home for Diwali or whatever. And we're looking at a domestic tourist visits of 2,321.98 million. I'm saying even if you say that 10% of these were actually on a holiday, then you're still looking at 232 million domestic travelers. Where's the connect? And why are we calling this a trend? It has always been like this. It's just that we are so focused on wanting that international traveler in that we have given the short shrift to our domestic travelers. And I think that's something that I quickly changed when I entered the film industry or the television industry, tourism industry, especially because the kind of business that we did. I said, forget the American. Yeah, they're all going to come to the Himalaya. How about getting the Indians to the Himalaya? How about getting them to come for rafting? How about them coming for trekking? And we have seen a huge response from Indians. Every time I let out a group saying, I'm leading this trek, or I'm leading this ski trip to Gulmarg, or I'm headed out to Kashmir, I have at least 15, 20, 30 people wanting to join. I don't take more than 8 to 10, but then I have innumerable number of departures. And these are all Indians. And it's been like this for 7 years that I've been here. So I don't see how that is considered a trend. And I think we should really be focusing on the domestic traveler. They are the people who are spending a lot more money as well. I think your inbound traveler, I don't have the numbers, but I don't see a large percentage of them spending more than, say, $100 a day. Your domestic traveler will spend that kind of money. They will spend that money in accommodation, food, transportation, etc., on a per head basis. So much larger spenders. And I think that should really, really be everybody should be focusing on that.
That's really fascinating. And before I forget, Soumya, please tweet that figure out. It's an important figure, but it's really, really fascinating to know. And I always thought it was the other way around, that international travelers were charged more at hotels, and it was domestic travelers who. It's a really interesting.
I saw somebody nodding their head. I think it was Gunjan, because this came as a shock to me. When I was doing costings, I was like completely shocked. I said, "To foreigner is paying lesser." I said, "Ye kaise hota hai? Ye mere ko samajh mein aaya nahi hai." Now these were because at that time we were associated with Mercury, and so the special rates used to come from Oberoi group of hotels. And I don't know if that is something that is across the board or if it was just something that Oberoi's did, but I found that absolutely shocking. And, the foreign traveler is really not staying in the Oberois or the Taj, or they are not staying there. During COVID, let me tell you, Rishikesh, the Kodiala Taj group, 85 rooms booked to capacity. And they're all Indians because there were no flights coming in from international. During COVID, I'm talking during COVID times, booked to capacity at 25,000 rupees a night.
That is
what are we talking about?
That's really fascinating, and it's really good to know that there is a. And why do you think that Indians are willing to spend more? The way you approach your tourism, and tourism is wrong, but the way you approach your philosophy of travel it's quite specific. Why do you think they take us for a better way of traveling? And they're willing to spend more, like you're saying, they're willing to spend up to $100 a day.
Interesting question. Yeah, you will find a lot of them who are not willing to, but there is a very, very large group of people who, especially with me, when they come for a trek or for a ski trip, my simple philosophy is you do not dip your hands into your pocket once you're on a trek with me. Everything is paid for from day 0 to the day you return back to your hometown. And so And that is a streamlined way, because when you're on a trek, nobody really has a wallet behind their back. When you're skiing, you don't want to ask somebody, hey, will you just give $100 for this cup of kava? So in that sense, the treks that we do, and a lot of my colleagues do, they are what you consider as high end. They're not the to use a very, very bad analogy, they're not the India hikes kind of treks. So we do them high end, and there are a whole lot of group of people who are willing to rough it out in luxury. And I think, and that is expanding.
That's fascinating. I'll definitely come back to you, Dilshad, for more questions. I'd like to bring in Sumit. Sumit, thank you for waiting for us to come to you. Sumit, what is your opinion? We've heard from Dilshad about, she says that domestic travel is not a trend. It's always been there. We just haven't focused on them and not realized their capacity to travel and spend. Rashmi has given her point of view that there's been a rise in travel for visiting with family and friends is picked up, leisure is picked up. What as an industry watcher, what is your opinion?
Hi, everyone. So I partly agree with Dilshad when she says that domestic tourists are an often ignored part of the demographic. But at the same time, it is true that it is apt that domestic travel is now gaining focus because the share of the pie has changed because of COVID. So if you just look at the recent numbers, I'll just share some data shared by Thomas Cook recently. Travel demand is back to 65% of pre-pandemic levels. Now, I'm just comparing before and after the pandemic. But if you look at the share of the pie, international travel is only 55% of what it used to be compared to September 2019. So that's pre-pandemic. But domestic travel is up to 90%. So if you just look at that graph, it's not that domestic travelers weren't forming a big chunk of the customers. It's just that now they're forming a bigger chunk of customers. So of course, people are customizing their offerings to the domestic traveler instead of, the European or the Russian who's coming in. So these numbers sort of reflect a reality that is quite obvious in COVID times, because a lot of countries cannot travel to India right now. They're confused by policies, vaccination policies, and fewer flights. The bandwidth of flying is reduced. Also, I'd like to share another set of numbers. According to DGCA, domestic air travel has surged around 27% sequentially in October itself to about 8.98 million tourists. So you see, when we started traveling post-May, post the horrific second wave, people were doing mostly road trips or traveling in their caravans to reduce exposure. But gradually, people are gaining confidence to fly again. So there are a lot more people flying to destinations. So their scope of travel in India itself has expanded. Of course, that has also meant that people are now more open to flying internationally. But why international travel hasn't picked up to its former numbers is because there are a limited number of countries that we can travel to right now. And even in those countries, international travel could have honestly eclipsed this, sort of retarded this growth in domestic travel. But we are seeing a surge in numbers in Europe again. And there is a virus variant of concern in South Africa as we speak. So there are developments that are worrisome for anybody traveling out of India. So there are a limited number of countries that people can look at. That obviously forces them to look at their backyard. That forces them to see where they can go in India and get a similar sort of experience. So if you want a beach destination, and if Europe is out of the picture, where can I go in India? Or, a neighboring country like Sri Lanka or the Maldives. So there, and also I'd like to point out there's another part that sort of promotes domestic travel right now is money. I'm not saying Indians don't have the spending capacity. Indians do. But what happens is people who are capable of traveling internationally can look at a limited number of countries, like I said. And because the flying capacity is limited, air ticket prices have skyrocketed to countries like the UK and the UAE. So people who would have otherwise flown out are forced to look domestically, are forced to look within the country and say, okay, where can I go in this budget with a family? So I think that partly, yes, domestic travel has always been an unignored portion of customers, but in these times, it is an amplified chunk of customers. So it's not unwarranted when people say that hotels and destinations are tweaking their offerings or their marketing plans to target domestic customers.
Thank you, Sumit. I have another question before I move on to Gunjan. What do you think of the digitally savvy Indian traveler? Are they really digitally savvy? I saw some research saying that they're among the most savviest in the world, but it doesn't somehow ring true.
No, I would.
When it comes to travel,
agree. I would definitely agree that they are digitally savvy, because what happened was that when the pandemic happened, Parul, the fundamental profile of the traveler changed, and it kind of changed not temporarily but permanently. So it changed the priorities, it changed the values, it changed the behavior of travelers, it changed the way they are planning their travel. And of course, as Rashmi mentioned, the entire focus is how can I travel safely and healthily, and I can make those choices. So then what became important for us was, we were posed with a challenge as communicators that now there is an audience who is not even going out to the nearby mall or the market, but we still have to keep them engaged. We still have to tell them, build a recall for that brand. We still have to tell them, hey, you know what, it's okay. Travel is going to come back. Things are going to be positive. So I think, again, taking that cue from what Rashmi mentioned, is technology played a huge role. And for us communicators, I think data and analytics helped us a lot, because what happened was through our, before this call, in this week, I also did a little bit of research through our proprietary tool, BrandWatch, and then Sherlock Plus, that kind of gives us that knowledge on what the consumers are searching, what influencers are looking to do, their relationship, their engagement, what are they talking about. And interestingly, when lockdown opened, it was literally revenge travel. I'm getting bored. I'm sitting at home. Whatever destination opens, I'll go. Nobody had this in mind, I will go here or I will go there. They just wanted to go. But gradually what we started seeing is that because we curated those messages, we curated those health and hygiene reassurances for our customers, they started planning travel. Okay, here people are going. That means this is a safe and a healthy and a hygienic place for us to go, and let us go there. And all of this is happening digitally. Virtual, who thought that virtual tours will be such a hit? But then virtual tours were a hit then. But now what is happening is that concept is starting to fade out, because now people have started to travel. But at that point of time, curating those messages and finding different platforms, say, be it reels, be it stories, be it posts. And, Sumit would agree, Sumit and I had kind of gone to a Europe trip in 2019. And, we did throwback posts, and throwback posts were the biggest inspiration for our digital savvy media. That, hey, remember, we had a great time, and the time is coming and we will again go. So yes, definitely, Parul. I mean, it's a digital world now, and we have to kind of see how we curate our messages, how we reach out to that audience at every touch point, and kind of keep putting our messages there saying that, keep the love for travel alive. Everything is okay. We'll get back. And specifically the safety, health and hygiene messaging. That's very important.
So I think that gives me a natural segue back to Rashmi and Dilshad. When you are communicating with your clients, and I'm going to call them clients for now, what are your communication priorities? What do you think is very important that they should know when they travel and set out to use your services? Rashmi?
Yeah, okay. So first of all, I would just, echo the same sentiment that that Gunjan was talking about, that, it was led, that entire revolution of, how to promote tourism during the time when everybody was sitting at home and dreaming about, their holiday destinations. It was all driven through the digital platforms. And when it all started, when the world started to open up, it was actually driven by the social media influencers also. So, they were the first one, really courageous one, to actually step out and create their videos and very interesting content to inspire and encourage and instill some kind of a confidence in people to, to go out and explore. Actually, given the nature of this crisis, I think that constant and useful communication was the key to building relationship, because when the pandemic was spreading and there were lockdowns and everything, and when everything was just on a standstill, and then when things started to open up, every state had different kind of guidelines and travel restrictions. In some states you needed RT-PCR test, which was not older than 72 hours. Some were saying it is okay to have a 40 to 48 hours prior to the travel. So there was a lot of confusion, anxiety related to travel. So as a brand, what we thought was that it was very important to create some kind of a awareness about the new guidelines, acquaint customers with the new norms, and with the COVID protocols, of course, and reiterate at the same time that flying is still the safest mode of transportation. So, this is something that has taken the front seat for us since last year. And we have been essentially communicating 2-3 things. One is the safety communication, that what is it that we as an airline are doing to ensure that their entire journey at every touch point is safe. So we had also started a campaign called Flying Feels Safe Again, where we were just talking about that, we do regular sanitization of the aircraft, how, e-boarding passes can be issued, how you get, baggage tag for your bags on your mobile phone, and also we collaborated with our manufacturing partners like Airbus and Boeing, where we created content to tell our customers that how that filtration of the air in the aircraft works. So a lot of these things were, created. The content was created and shared using the digital medium, because print was not doing that well, because you touch the magazine, so magazines were out of questions. People were just consuming so much content on the internet and on social media platform of the brands. We also ensured that our website was regularly updated with the relevant information about the travel restrictions in every state, guidelines including the COVID test requirements, so on and so forth. So basically every SOP that we were following, we were regularly communicating, and at the same time we ensured that our leadership is also connected with the customer. So we had their messages sent to them through emailers or through smaller video bites. Along with that, we had also created a campaign called Flyer Code. So through that campaign, we just wanted to communicate to our customers that it is not only the responsibility of the airline to maintain safety for you at every touch point, but it is a shared responsibility. And what is it that you have to do to ensure, join hands with the airlines? For that, you have to, code means actually careful, observant, D is for distant, and E is for empathetic. So you have to follow all these things. You have to be observant, you have to be careful, you have to follow your social distancing, you have to take care of every protocol. And then together we'll be able to create a safe flying experience for you as well as for our staff also. So that is what, from a communication point of view, these were some of our focus areas, and we continue to focus on these experience. And goes without saying that all these things were done in the regulatory framework. We actually had conducted a customer survey also to understand how the travel, the confidence in them is building, and how we can actually amplify that. So whatever insights that came from that survey, we tried to incorporate that into our processes and make those processes more robust.
Thank you, Rashmi. I think most of us in our lifetime never get to do at such scale and such complexity. So it's really an experience to the lifetime learning. So thank you for sharing that. Dilshad, over to you. Yours is a very different kind of operation, of course. How did you assure and reach out to the customer during the pandemic?
Yeah, I wish we had the resources that Rashmi is talking about. That the adventure travel industry by itself is a very different beast altogether. It's not a. In fact, back in May 2020, I actually wrote a LinkedIn article where I said that perhaps this is the best time for us to recoup and sit back and look at the adventure travel industry, because one of the key things in our industry is that we are SMEs. We're small, we're quick, we're nimble, we're flexible, and we can literally switch within 24 hours in terms of itineraries, routing, etc. And the other thing is, our itineraries, our product inventory is perishable. The moment the time is gone, that day for the trek is gone. So, they're not trucks waiting. There are not empty airline seats in that sense where the money is being wasted. But on the flip side, the adventure travel industry had all the protocols that Rashmi is talking about naturally in place. We already had the social distancing. One of the things that we did in the company was we quickly changed our primary treks to places that were accessible by cars. So if you wanted to go for a trek, then it couldn't be Srinagar, because most people can't drive more than, say, 12 hours. But it could be Manali, it could be Dehradun, it could say, I'm talking about Himalaya. And so that's what we did, is we quickly changed our itineraries literally overnight, to focusing on areas that were accessible to people by car. And Rashmi is absolutely right. The RT-PCR tests drove us insane, because by the time the person had sat in the car, driven 9 hours, the RT-PCR regulation had changed. And, they've left Delhi or Bombay or whatever thinking, oh, I don't need an RT-PCR test. And by the time you land over there, you're asked for one. So, those were challenges that we all faced. In fact, my daughter and I did this trip for 15 days. A fantastic epic road trip that took us across roads that were non-existent. It was an off-road trip. And literally in one day, we did 6 rapid antigen tests, because we were bouncing from Himachal to Ladakh, and Ladakh to Kashmir, and Kashmir back into Himachal. And, we would keep showing the rapid. 3 ghanta pehle kiya hai. No, you do it again. So I think in that sense, the booths at the roadhead of these states were very well organized. I think in that sense, the states really stepped up to the challenge, whether it was Ladakh, whether it was Kashmir, whether it was Himachal, whether it was Uttarakhand. Yes, it was messy in the beginning. Yes, we had to stand in long queues to get an approval for the car to move. I'm like, I've got an RT-PCR test. Why do I need a car pass? So I think everybody was trying to kind of find their way through this mess. But the adventure travel industry had advantages. I feel that we didn't capitalize on those. But I think that we are now reaping the benefits of this COVID time, in the sense that I'm getting so many calls saying, send us to the mountains. Acha, where do you want to go? Anywhere where there are no people. So, that's literally the brief I'm getting. And my next question is, are you willing to fly? Yeah, not a problem. So there you are, Rashmi. You guys are getting your act together there for sure, because now people are ready to fly. 1 year earlier, it was, wherever we can drive. So, things are changing. And I think we need to adapt really fast and really quickly. There is no going back to the old ways any longer. These are new times. I hate the word new normal. I think that's ridiculous. It's such a oxymoron. But these are new times, and we have to quickly change and adapt to those. And I have to say that some of the airlines have done a fabulous job. Vistara, I think, Rashmi, has done a fantastic job, because so many times I have clients saying, okay, do I need an RT-PCR? And I just tell my colleague, yaar, Vistara ka hai, dekh le. They will tell you for sure, because y'all have been really good at rapidly changing your digital information as it keeps coming through. And I think that's what I want to say. I think we had the normal protocols of COVID. We had the social distancing already, so that was not a new beast for us to handle. We didn't take large groups. Thankfully, the groups of 60 people and 30 people and 40 people, those days were gone. I don't think those days will ever come back. I hope they don't, because they destroy the environment that they enter into. So I think our natural heritage received a little bit of a breather in these last 2 years, which is not such a bad thing either.
Thank you, Dilshad. Over to Sumit. Sumit, what is the big domestic tourism story that you think you would be reporting on? Because you're the target of all the pitches from the PR firms and brands to cover what's happening. So what's your take on what's the big story?
So look, there are two kinds of things that we do as a media publication. One is to test where the wind is flowing, and the other is to sort of subtly nudge it towards the direction that we want to see it go. I think as a media publication, look, I'll agree with Gunjan when she said that when travel first opened up, when the lockdowns were removed, people just fled to the first destination they could. So if you were in Bombay, you were going to Goa. If you were in Delhi, you were going to Manali. And it wasn't as callous as it was projected, because look, when you're in a high rise in a city and an airborne virus is wreaking havoc, you want to get out and get some air. You want to go to a private villa and live there with your family. It's not just a question of privilege or leisure. It becomes a necessity. It becomes something that you do for your health, physical and mental. So people weren't callous to sort of just fly off or drive away from their cities, but it was a matter of health first. Of course, what that resulted in, what you were saying, most people went to Goa or Manali or Udaipur, Rishikesh, and these are actually in the top 10 booked destinations between October and November as well. I'm looking at some figures. What we as a media publication did was we were very happy that people were traveling, of course, because that puts us in business. But we also we ran a campaign this year about discovering the undiscovered. Basically, where we told people where they could go. Instead of the most popular destination in a state, what is the second most popular? What is the third most popular? What is a destination that you can discover without too much uncertainty, without too much hassle? Because we were sort of trying to prevent over-tourism. And at the same time, it also works in the sustainability aspect. It puts less load on the site and on the people and on the culture, on the land. It also helps you maintain COVID protocol. So we all saw videos of 100 odd people beneath a waterfall somewhere in Himachal. Now that's not what you want when you escape Bombay or Delhi. That's not where you want to go. You want to be in a private villa somewhere, or you want to be the only person beneath a waterfall, right? So as a media publication, we took it upon ourselves as an ethical thing to sort of encourage people to discover different locations. So let's say a Jibi instead of Manali, or a Sanj Valley instead of Manali, if you really want to go to Himachal, or a Sandan Valley in Maharashtra, or a Khimsar in Rajasthan, let some people, if some people want to go to Jaipur, that's fine. But there are other destinations that you can look at if you want to steer clear of those destinations. Dauki in Meghalaya, there are so many. And of course, one of the other themes that emerged was people wanted to be amidst nature, which is not a big surprise. When you're sort of stuck in concrete buildings for over 1.5 years, you want to be in a villa that is ensconced in vines, or have a river view or have an ocean view to yourself. So we also focused on those things. We encouraged people to travel sustainably and responsibly and travel to places which perhaps would afford them very naturally social distancing or physical distancing, And because of that, discerning travelers who write for us, people who do this for a living, also talk about how they've tweaked their travel plans from before pandemic to post pandemic. And more people are looking at boutique properties with fewer keys. so that they naturally get physical distancing as part of the plan. They don't have to pay extra for it. They naturally get a retreat, a villa away from somebody. So when you open the door, you don't have to worry about a stranger without a mask on.
Thank you, Gunjan. Thank you, Rashmi, Sumit, Dilshad, all of you. Thank you so much for coming here and sharing your views. Thanks to the audience who has really patiently listened all through. I'd also like to thank Hill & Holden Strategies for giving us the platform to discuss these interesting issues. And specifically, Gunjan, for all your support, and Megha and Abhishek throughout this event. My colleague Soumya, who's painstakingly put together the event behind the scenes. Thank you, all of you. May the road always be friendly, and may you always have the right baggage with you. With that, goodbye and have a great weekend.